The air buzzed with tension inside the Las Vegas arena as media crews, fans, and fighters gathered for the pre-fight press conference of the biggest MMA event of the year. The stage, lit by spotlights and flanked by sponsor banners, was filled with seasoned champions, rising stars, and loud personalities. But no one drew more attention than Jax, the Viper, or Maddox, a brash, undefeated 28-year-old with a record as sharp as his tongue. Known for devastating knockouts and an ego to match, Jax wasn't just a fighter, he was a showman. His slick-back hair, custom-fit suit, and flashy designer sunglasses screamed arrogance. But it was his mouth that did the most damage outside the cage. Leaning into the microphone with a practiced smirk, Jax scanned the crowd before launching into a trademark rant. You know, there's a lot of talk about legends in this sport. People bring up names like Royce Gracie, Bruce Lee, and, get this, Chuck Norris, he said, snickering. Chuck Norris? That guy's a meme. A walking internet joke. He ain't a fighter. He's a bedtime story for boomers. The crowd laughed nervously, unsure whether to cheer or cringe. Some reporters chuckled behind their laptops, while others raised eyebrows, sensing the comment would stir controversy. Jax didn't stop there. With exaggerated theatrics, he mimicked a slow-motion roundhouse kick and mockingly stumbled over his feet. Oh no, watch out. It's the legendary roundhouse kick. Boom! Instant coma, he shouted, pretending to fall asleep at the mic. The room burst into laughter again, this time louder. But not everyone found it funny. Veterans in the sport, along with a wave of older fans watching the live stream, were stunned at the blatant disrespect. Look, Jax continued, Chuck Norris couldn't last a minute in today's MMA. You put him in the cage with me, and he's a warm-up drill. I respect the past, but let's be real. Dinosaurs don't belong in the octagon. Cameras flashed like lightning, capturing every word, every sneer. Matter of fact, if he's got the guts, I'll fight him. 1 round. Live. Let's see what happens when legends meet reality. The arena buzzed. Phones lit up. Within an hour, sports networks were looping the clip, and hashtags like hashtag Chuck vs. Viper and hashtag Respect the Roundhouse began trending. Analysts argued on talk shows, debating whether it was just promotional bait or a genuine challenge. The internet had a field day with memes and mock posters, some showing Chuck Norris looking confused in a nursing home, others placing Jax in a coffin with a boot imprint across his face. For fans who grew up on Walker, Texas Ranger, and Way of the Dragon, the insult wasn't just funny, it felt personal. Hundreds of miles away on a quiet Texas ranch, Chuck Norris watched the clip on a laptop. He sat still, wearing a flannel shirt and a calm expression that didn't match the online chaos unfolding around him. His wife, Gina, placed a cup of tea beside him and asked if he was going to respond. Chuck didn't say much. He just watched the video again, then clicked it off and looked out the window at the rising sun. I remember when fighters had respect, he said quietly. The next morning, Chuck posted a rare video on his long-dormant social media account. The clip was 12 seconds long. No music, no flashy intro, just Chuck standing in an empty dojo, in jeans and boots, in front of a heavy bag. He looked into the camera, nodded once, and delivered a single roundhouse kick that snapped the bag with a thunderous echo. Then he walked off screen. There were no words in the video, but the message was clear. It wasn't a threat, it was a reminder. The video went viral in less than an hour. MMA veterans reposted it with captions like, "Oh, and he still got it." Jax, ever the provocateur, fired back with a selfie, flexing in front of a mirror with the caption, "Chuck who?" Then he posted a video of himself limping dramatically with a cane, sarcastically warning his fans that he might get kicked into a different dimension. Behind the scenes, however, the MMA promotion's executives saw dollar signs. A Chuck Norris appearance, even a staged one, was ratings gold. 3 days later, the promotion made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the sports world. Chuck Norris would be appearing live at the upcoming event for a special confrontation. No one knew exactly what that meant. Would it be a cameo? A skit? A confrontation? Fans flooded forums and ticketing sites, speculating. Overnight, the event's status transformed from a standard fight night into a cultural moment. Jax welcomed the spotlight. He doubled down on the trash talk, calling Chuck Gramps the Hammer and offering to buy him orthopedic shoes. On an appearance with a late-night host, he brought out a fake beard and did an impersonation of Chuck meditating in slow motion. He was riding the attention wave, milking it for all it was worth. But the tone started to shift as the days wore on. Chuck made no further public comments. He didn't attend interviews. He didn't post more clips. The silence was unsettling. Meanwhile, Chuck trained in private. He didn't call in elite trainers or make a media spectacle of it. Instead, he returned to basics, kata, breathing drills, endurance runs. His dojo echoed with focus, not fanfare. "This isn't about beating a kid," he told his old friend and training partner. "It's about reminding the world what martial arts really mean." Fight night arrived. The arena was packed, buzzing louder than ever. Celebrities filled the front row, and chants of "Chuck, Chuck" battled with "Viper, Viper" signs in the stands. Backstage, Jax rehearsed his elaborate walkout. Smoke machines, pyrotechnics, and a hip-hop remix of an old Chuck Norris meme song. He looked confident, cocky, untouchable. Chuck arrived at the arena unnoticed, wearing a plain leather jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap. No entourage, no music, just a man walking with purpose. As he passed security, one guard blinked and muttered, "Is that really?" Chuck gave a subtle nod and kept walking. Backstage staff and fighters stopped what they were doing when he passed. Some reached out to shake his hand. Others just stared. Even among professionals, there was reverence. When Chuck entered the locker room, the cameras didn't follow. But everyone sensed it. Something different was about to happen. Inside the arena, the main announcer boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the call-outs, you've heard the noise, but tonight, you'll see the moment." The lights dimmed. The energy surged, and the crowd leaned forward, bracing for whatever was coming next. The arena lights dimmed to a deep blue. Music thumped in the background, and all attention shifted to the tunnel as Jax, the Viper, Maddox, made his way toward the octagon. His entrance was pure spectacle. Shirt off, tattoos glistening, surrounded by a crew of trainers, hype men, and a guy waving a giant cardboard cutout of Chuck Norris with a cane and oxygen tank. The walkout song? A remix trap beat layered with old Chuck Norris joke one-liners turned into punchlines. Jax shadowboxed to the beat, grinning wildly, feeding off the energy. The crowd was electric, a mix of cheers, boos, and stunned laughter. Inside the cage, Jax strutted, high-fiving fans through the fencing and mimicking slow-motion martial arts moves for the cameras. He stopped in the center, leaned into the mic, and shouted, "Time to retire a legend tonight. Someone call his grandkids, 'cause Grandpa's about to take a nap." The crowd roared, half in outrage, half in amusement. Everyone waited for the next moment, and even those who thought this was just a publicity stunt now leaned forward in their seats, curious. Then the lights cut completely. For 5 seconds, there was nothing but darkness and silence. No music, no announcer, just breathing and tension. Then, a single spotlight beamed down onto the far end of the walkway. From the tunnel emerged a lone figure. No entourage, no music, no fanfare. Chuck Norris walked out, steady and calm, dressed in a simple black GI top, dark jeans, and boots. The only sound was the crowd's shifting gasps and murmurs as they realized it was actually him, live, in person. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just walked forward, every step deliberate, his posture unshakable. It wasn't a show. It was a statement. As he approached the octagon, even the rowdy fans quieted, unsure of what they were witnessing. The cage door opened for him, and Chuck stepped inside, nodding briefly to the referee. Jax laughed, clapping mockingly from across the cage. "I didn't think you'd actually show up, old man," he said, smirking. "But hey, I'm glad. I always wanted to slap a legend around before breakfast." Chuck looked at him with eyes that didn't blink. "You think this is about fighting?" he asked, voice calm but firm. "This is about respect." Jax shrugged and stretched, clearly unfazed. "Respect doesn't win fights. Skill does. And I got more in my left pinky than you got in your whole body." Chuck didn't answer. He simply stepped into the center, hands loose, eyes focused like a man ready for meditation or war, or both. The referee, clearly unsure how serious this exhibition would be, asked if both were ready. Chuck nodded once. Jax grinned. "Let's dance," he said. The bell rang. For the first 10 seconds, Jax circled Chuck, light on his feet, testing with jabs and low kicks that didn't connect. Chuck stood still, almost statue-like, watching. Calm. Then Jax threw a real strike, a quick 1-2 combo aimed at the head. Chuck leaned back with a breath's margin and stepped to the side. No counter, just control. The crowd reacted with gasps. Jax raised his eyebrows. Okay. You still got reflexes. I'll give you that. He darted forward, this time throwing a spinning back kick aimed at the ribs. Chuck blocked it with his forearm, took a small step back, and answered. Not with a punch, but with a shift in stance. His breathing remained steady, measured. Jax, frustrated, rushed in with a series of punches fast and wild. Chuck parried each one like he was conducting wind, redirecting energy with minimal motion. Then, finally, Chuck struck. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't fast. It was a simple open-hand palm strike that landed squarely in the center of Jax's chest, stopping him mid-charge like he'd hit a wall. The sound of contact echoed in the cage, and Jax stumbled back, blinking in confusion. He wasn't hurt, just stunned. What the hell was that? He muttered, rubbing his sternum. Chuck didn't chase. He stood still again, waiting. Something shifted then. The crowd sensed it. Jax did too. This wasn't some slow old man cashing in on a legacy appearance. This was a martial artist, a warrior, not here to entertain, but to remind. Angry now, Jax threw a leg kick with venom. Chuck checked it cleanly, stepped in, and delivered a knee strike to the body that folded Jax slightly. Still, Jax smiled through the pain. All right, legend. Let's go. He exploded forward with a flying knee, but Chuck slid sideways, catching him midair with a controlled sweep that brought Jax down. He didn't slam him. He didn't gloat. He simply helped him up and backed away. The crowd stood to their feet, roaring. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was something else. A lesson. Jax, breathing hard now, wiped blood from his lip. He hadn't even noticed when he'd taken a glancing strike. For the first time, he looked unsure. You're not even trying, are you? Chuck finally spoke. Trying to prove something? No. Try to remind you that confidence without humility is just noise. A hush fell again. Even the announcers at ringside didn't speak. Jax lowered his fist slightly. You think this is some after-school special? This is a cage, man. This is real. Chuck tilted his head. Exactly. Then Jax roared and charged, throwing everything. Elbows, hooks, kicks. Chuck weaved, blocked, absorbed. Then in one fluid motion, he pivoted and delivered a spinning roundhouse kick. Not full force, not aimed to injure, but just hard enough to knock Jax's mouthguard out and drop him to one knee. The arena went silent. Jax stayed down, breathing hard, staring at the mat, his ego cracked wide open. Chuck approached slowly, extended a hand. Not as an opponent, but as a teacher. Jax looked up at him. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Jax took the hand. Chuck pulled him up, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said quietly, You've got talent, kid. But talent without respect is wasted. Jax, sweating and humbled, nodded. The look in his eyes had changed. It wasn't defeat, it was understanding. The crowd erupted, not in shock this time, but in awe. Fans cheered, others cried, and even the commentary booth went quiet for a moment before calling it the most unexpected, powerful moment in MMA history. Chuck raised Jax's hand, signaling to the crowd that there was no animosity, only a lesson passed on. The arena lit up with applause, and social media exploded with praise. Fighters, trainers, celebrities, and even longtime critics flooded timelines with reactions. It wasn't a win or a loss. It was a statement, a passing of wisdom, a reminder. As Chuck left the cage, he didn't wait for interviews or cameras. He walked out the way he came in, quietly, humbly, like a ghost from another era who had returned just long enough to set things right. Jax stood alone in the cage, staring after him, visibly shaken but changed. He picked up the mic, paused, and then simply said, I was wrong. That man's not a legend. He's a master. And for the first time in his career, Jax the Viper Maddox bowed. As Chuck Norris walked slowly backstage, the crowd still on their feet and roaring with a kind of reverence, a strange quiet followed him. It wasn't silence in the literal sense. The arena was still filled with energy, but it was as if the very tone of the event had changed. The cameras caught glimpses of young fighters watching monitors in disbelief, trainers shaking their heads in respectful awe, and longtime fans wiping away tears they didn't expect to shed. No one had anticipated this. They came for circus. They stayed for masterclass. But it wasn't over. Back inside the cage, Maddox stood still, clutching the microphone. He had just admitted the truth, that Chuck Norris wasn't some internet relic, but a genuine martial artist unlike any he'd ever encountered. And though the crowd had cheered, and Chuck had already made his way off the stage, something still burned in Jax's chest. Not anger, not embarrassment, but a fire to grow. For the first time in his career, the cameras didn't love him because he was flashy, but because he had shown something raw. Humility. He turned to the promoter who stood just outside the cage and spoke words no one saw coming. "Give me one round. A real one. No cameras. No crowd. Just me and him in the gym. When I'm ready." The promoter raised his eyebrows, impressed. "You sure?" he asked. Jax nodded. "Yeah. I need to earn that handshake next time." Meanwhile, Chuck sat in the locker room alone, wrapping his hands again, even though the exhibition was technically over. One of the producers entered, holding a phone. "You've gone viral," the man said breathlessly. "Over 30 million views in 2 hours. You can name your price right now. Exhibition rematches, coaching appearances, maybe a movie deal." Chuck didn't look up. He finished tying his wraps and said calmly, "I didn't come here for any of that. I came to settle something that didn't sit right with me." The producer paused. "So what now?" Chuck looked up and replied, "Now I go home." But fate had other plans. Just as Chuck began changing back into his street clothes, a knock came at the door. It was Jax, alone, no cameras, no entourage, no show. Just a young man in sweats and bruises, standing like a student at the dojo gates. "I didn't come to challenge you again," Jax said quickly. "I just came to say thank you." Chuck nodded, gesturing for him to come in. There was no judgment in his eyes, just the steady, focused presence of a man who had spent decades mastering not only fighting, but stillness. "I fought a lot of people," Jax said, sitting down on the bench. "But no one's ever made me feel like that, like I was 5 years old and back in my first karate class, getting schooled." Chuck chuckled gently. "That's the funny thing about the martial path. The further you go, the more you realize it's not about defeating others. It's about defeating the part of yourself that thinks you already know everything." Jax nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the event organizers burst in, holding a phone. "We've got Dana White on the line," he said, stunned. "He wants to turn this into a formal exhibition next month, televised. You and Jax. 2 full rounds. Real stakes." Jack stood, his eyes wide. "Are you serious?" The man nodded. "The fans are begging for it." Chuck looked at Jax, then back at the organizer. "One condition," he said. "No trash talk. No drama. Just martial arts, pure, honest, and disciplined. If we do this, it's not a show. It's a teaching moment." Jax extended his hand without hesitation. Agreed. 1 month later, they stood across from each other again. Not in an arena packed with fire and noise, but in a stripped-down, traditional setting, a televised special taking place in a quiet gym, filmed in black and white for effect, audience limited to fellow fighters, students, and a few family members. The world tuned in from home. The commentary was minimal. The mood was reverent. Round 1 began with both men bowing to each other and to the judges. What followed was a clean, technical, and beautiful display of martial arts. Jax had trained hard in the interim. His style was sharper, more focused, less explosive, but more calculated. He wasn't fighting with ego anymore. He was applying knowledge. Chuck matched him step for step, showing not only precision, but incredible endurance for his age. The two moved with a rhythm that felt like music, not combat. In the final minute of the first round, Jax landed a clean body shot that made Chuck smile. "You're learning," he said mid-exchange. "Keep going." In round 2, Chuck subtly shifted tactics, pushing Jax harder, forcing him to dig deeper into strategy and composure. Jax rose to the occasion, managing a near takedown and defending against Chuck's signature sidekick. When the final bell rang, both men stood upright, breathing hard but smiling, not in victory, but in mutual recognition. There was no declared winner. No need. The victory was the moment itself. After the exhibition, the footage went viral again, not because of violence, but because of beauty. Young fighters began posting side-by-side videos of themselves, learning techniques from the match. MMA forums shifted tone for weeks, filled with discussions about discipline, honor, and the history of martial arts. "We forgot this part," one viral comment read. Chuck Norris just reminded us all. More surprisingly, Jax became a different figure in the public eye. No longer just a loudmouth with quick hands, he evolved into a respected martial artist. He opened a youth dojo 6 months later called Viper Legacy Academy, teaching young fighters not only technique, but the code he had once ignored. On the wall, in bold lettering, were the words, "Humility is the beginning of mastery." Beneath it, a photo of him bowing to Chuck Norris. Chuck, meanwhile, returned to his quiet Texas ranch. Offers came in: books, movie scripts, speaking tours. He accepted none of them. He'd said what he needed to say with his actions, and for him, that was enough. A letter arrived weeks later, signed by over 100 current UFC fighters. It simply read, "Thank you for the reminder." In the end, it wasn't just a fight. It wasn't even a redemption arc. It was a moment when time stopped, when a generation raised on showmanship met one raised on discipline, and both came away changed. Chuck Norris didn't win or lose. He didn't humiliate or dominate. He simply walked into a world that had forgotten, and with one calm presence, reminded it what martial arts truly were. And that's what shocked the entire arena. Not the roundhouse kick, not the defense, not even the fall of the cocky fighter. It was the way Chuck Norris made everyone, from cage warriors to YouTube fans, remember something deeper. That strength without wisdom is noise, and that true power is always quiet.